let me just get right to it. Last December 2021, King and I had a miscarriage. So that means, yes, we were pregnant, and I just want to walk you through what happened. November 2021, King and I celebrated our second wedding anniversary. We actually did a cruise to nowhere in Hong Kong, and it was on the cruise that I found out that I was actually pregnant, and that was magical. That was such a beautiful day. We had been wanting to get pregnant, but it was a surprise to both of us, so we were just beyond happy. I remember thinking that there was no comparison to that joy other than the day I got engaged slash married and the day someone receives Jesus. And a few days later, so this was still November, we had our first ultrasound, which I can show you. It's just this tiny little dot there. You can't even see it's a baby, but that little white speck is our baby, was our baby. And then we were supposed to go back 2 weeks later to hear the heartbeat. And then we didn't make it to the 2 weeks later because it was just 1 week later. So now it's December 2021. I started having some miscarriage symptoms, but I didn't know what was going on. So that evening, Key and I just hung out at home, tried to relax, and then by the next morning, we had already lost our baby. Monday morning was the most physically and emotionally challenging day of my entire life. It was not the most spiritually challenging because that's when God is there for us the most, is when we are in the greatest pain. Monday morning, I made King breakfast, he went to work, and I was feeling unwell, and Monday is my day off, so I went back to bed, but then felt so uncomfortable. I was tossing and turning, couldn't fall asleep. I called my mom, and she's amazing. I love my mom and my dad so much. And she gave me some tips and was encouraging me to eat food I hadn't eaten. So I grabbed mango juice, and then it just kept spiraling, getting worse. I had a fever. I was pouring sweat. The pain was increasing. And by this time, I had called King, and he was just dropping work, coming home ASAP. And no one at this time was saying out loud miscarriage, but I was definitely thinking that because it was so weird what was going on. But again, I just knew that God is good. So I was also having a hard time thinking because I was in so much pain. And so the pain increased, and then I would start throwing up. And this whole time, my mom was on the phone because King was still hurrying back home. So even though my mom wasn't in person with me, I felt like she was holding my hand. The whole phone call was like 40 minutes long. And at one point, I was like, can you just be there and don't ask me questions? Because I just needed someone there, and she did. She was amazing. Back to when I was throwing up, that's when I felt something come out of me, and then King came like moments after that, and the fever immediately left, and I was still feeling really unwell. So of course we made an appointment to see our doctor. By the time we made it to the doctor, we really were sure in our hearts that it had been a miscarriage, and then our doctor confirmed it. I remember when she looked and did another ultrasound, she said that there was nothing inside. And if you can see the comparison here, like the dot to no dot, and I thought to myself, no, this can't be happening. This is not real. Like, she's talking to the wrong person. This isn't me. This is not our story. Like, I never imagined this would happen to me. If you've been through a miscarriage, you've probably felt the same way, or any kind of loss. And I just want to say right now that although this is extremely painful, my miscarriage, I know that there's women who in families who go through way worse. I've heard of stories of a couple having 14 miscarriages or losing their baby at 18 months old, So I'm not at all trying to share this story to say that, oh, my story is worse, or, to someone to have pity on me. Like, no, not at all. I know there's people who go through far, far more painful things, but I wanted to open up and share about this because pain is pain. No matter what degree you experience it on, there is one who will help us through the pain, and that is Jesus. Back to the story. When the doctor was telling me and King this, of course, I was like already having tears in my eyes, and she encouraged us that it's not necessarily our problem, that the majority of miscarriages are literally because of the baby's development. It has nothing to do with the mom and the dad. Which, by the way, we did have our case reviewed, and they confirmed it later that it was just the baby. It had nothing to do with King and I. We left the doctor's room and were waiting to check out, and I couldn't hold back the tears. I'm sobbing, and there's other people in the room. I did not care. And at that similar time, there was another couple who also had an ultrasound that day, and they came out of the office looking at their lovely picture, and they were laughing and smiling, and they looked similar age to King and I remember thinking, in that moment, I really have a choice right now. I could be so angry at them because I felt like King and I were robbed. The greatest blessing in our lives, our baby, was just stolen from us. And to be honest, I felt angry at my own body because my body did something I was completely against. And it felt unfair. But here's this couple, why is it all going well for them? And they're laughing and have joy. But in that moment, I remember thinking that there's no way I can feel angry at them or jealous, because new life is new life. And whether it's their baby or our baby, it's the greatest blessing. I was sad, yes, that we had just lost our baby, but I chose in that moment, I'm going to celebrate new life. Since the miscarriage, I have cried a lot, and there has been a lot of pain, but the point being is that every time there's joy, I can't help but celebrate when there's a new life, and that is God's plan. And that's what I want to share, is that it is God's plan that babies are born and they're healthy and strong. It is not God's plan that there is death and there is miscarriage. And I want to make that really clear, that it is not God's fault that we had a miscarriage. And it's not because King and I had some great sin in our life that we had a miscarriage. God's not weird like that. And there's a Bible verse that says, the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I, meaning Jesus, have come to give you life, and life to the full. And that's what I've felt on that day, that is wrong, and it's not God. It is all part of this broken world we live in, which, if you know about the beginning of the world, when God created it and made Adam and Eve, and then they disobeyed, they chose their own way, and that's when brokenness and what we call sin came in. And since then, there's been sickness and famine and war, and ever since then as well, God has been showing us his love. Number one way is through Jesus. There is hope, there is joy, there is salvation. All that to say, in this moment of the painful miscarriage, of course I had questions. And of course there was a moment I felt angry at God. I knew it wasn't his fault, but I'm like, God, I'm your child. What? What was this? And I knew that God was with me. And it is hard to describe with natural words. As my dad often says, it's hard to describe spiritual things with natural words, but I felt like God was giving my heart a big hug, if you can imagine what that feels like. I felt like the literal physical presence of someone else in the room with me, and there was peace. From the very beginning, he was with me and he was burdened with me. And when I cried out to him, asking, why did this happen? Why is it so unfair? And he did answer me. What he told me was, yes, it is unfair. And that surprised me because I I didn't expect him to like agree with me in that moment, because like, yeah, it is unfair. I know, I get it. I lost my son too. And I had never thought of it in that way before, that God sent his only son, Jesus, to die for me and you in our place, because sin, brokenness does separate us from God. We're not supposed to go to heaven. We're not supposed to have a close relationship with God now. But because of what Jesus did, we do. Yay! And it's that simple. You just believe in him and you can have it. But yet God understood that pain, that loss of a child. And since that moment, I felt a deeper understanding of God's love for me. And I can honestly say that even though we don't know when we're going to have a baby, I still have hope. I still have joy. And the only reason I can say that is because of God. I would be such a mess without him. Because there were days when I was sobbing and it hurt so deeply in my heart. And then I would read the Bible and it would just change my whole perspective to think of my life and not just a little microscope, but think of it as a whole big picture and how God has planned out my life from beginning to end. And that whether I have the baby now or next year or in 10 years, my life on this earth is so short. So if I keep my goal, my purpose going, that just whether I have the baby now or not is not going to determine my happiness in life. I have to stick to what is my purpose. By the way, something that really helped me in this process is listening to encouraging podcasts and of course the Bible. But about podcasts, there's one by Dr. Caroline Leaf. She is a brain doctor and she actually recently published a podcast called, what's it called? It's about grief, recovering through grief in the right way, something like that. If you are grieving or you know a friend who's grieving, I'd encourage you to look her up, as she's just going through the basic scientific facts about our brain and how we process grief. So that one really helped me to understand what was happening. Also, Pastor Chris Hodges, also my own pastor, Pastor Steve, and the message at Faith Family Church, all of that greatly helped me through this process of grieving. One last thing I want to say is thank you so much to King, my husband. He was beyond amazing during this whole process, because not only was he hurting, but he was also there for me. He would take the time to listen, or if I wasn't sharing, to ask how he could help, or just the fact that he dropped work and ran home when he heard that I wasn't feeling well. This was before we knew it was a miscarriage or whatever. He just rushed home, did whatever he could. But that's just a little example of some of the sacrificial things King has done. I am beyond blessed to be his wife. So I just want to say thank you so much, and I love you so much, King. Now to the present. Yay, I made this video. I've been wanting to make it for a long time, and believe it or not, this is take number 4 and 4 different days. Like, this is the 4th completely different day, different month, because I kept taking it. I'm like, it's not good, take it again and again and again. So anyways, yes, I hope this brings some encouragement and light to your life. And again, I'm not sharing this just to have pity on myself. I'm sharing this because God is good all the time. And if you are in that pain, whether it be a miscarriage, a loss of a loved one, a loss of business, or whatever difficulty it is, I would encourage you to cry out to God. Go to the Bible, go to a church, and that is where He will speak to you. He will lead you and help you to not only recover, but to thrive and be doing better off than before it happened, which is something I never thought was possible. So, yes, love you very much, and thank you for watching.